All right, I want to talk about change management today and how we navigate through this in business. The story that I want to share is related to an acquisition and an integration, which is very common in oil and gas. And there are very few successful integrations in any industry vertical, and I want to talk through why. When we finalized the transaction, the company made the decision to put somebody in charge of the integration, kind of being that integration leader. Unfortunately, they didn't have any experience in integrations, let alone managing change. And so, in very short order, things started to fall apart. A few months go by, and they asked me to kind of step in and start helping to get things moving in the right direction. So I did. The first thing that I ended up doing was sitting down with all of the teams at the company that we had acquired to better understand what was going on. How did their business operate? What were all of the workflows and the processes and the systems? Then I sat down with all of the business leaders that were already part of the company just to make sure. I had a pretty good idea, but I just wanted to make sure that we had everything mapped out on the acquiring company side of things. Then it was a gap assessment. Hey, we've got these systems and processes over here that work really well. Actually, better than what we have over here. Now, there were also instances where this side had better applications and systems than this side. We ended up bringing everybody together and talking through the pros and cons. Now, this is really step one, is making sure that you do your research, that you understand what's going on, and then build a plan around that. The next thing that I want to talk about is communication, because you can't expect to navigate through change if you can't effectively communicate. This is a big miss, and people seemingly forget that when working with engineers, you have to communicate to them in a certain way. They want data, they want logic, they want facts. When you are working with HR professionals or salespeople, they want energy and excitement. These are the things that just really light them up. So you have to communicate with the engineers in one way, with HR in another way, with marketing and sales in another way. These are all skills that we need to understand around effective communication, but you have to consistently communicate over and over and over. And sometimes this feels exhausting. It's that extra work around communication that brings everything together. Once you have your plan and you are effectively communicating and you start to implement through the change, then it's a reinforcement exercise. Because what will happen is you start to bring everybody in line, and then eventually, somebody's going to try to revert back. No, you have to come back in line because this is the new direction that we're moving. So there's this constant exercise where people are trying to fall back. Nope, we're going to keep moving forward together. And as you do this, over time, people will start to fall in line. Okay, great. At a very high level, those are 3 tips that we can use. How do we do this at scale? If we have a company, a small business owner, and they've only got 5 employees, it's relatively easy to get all of them on the same page. Business owner, hey, cool, this is what we're going to do. All right, everybody's on board. Maybe not everybody, but for the most part, we can all get in line, and yay, we are winning, smiley face. As the business grows, this starts to change a little bit. We have the leader of the business, and then we have more employees and more layers to contend with. Can you still get them all on board? Absolutely. Does it take a little bit more time? Yes. But what you're probably going to end up having to do is get this group on board, this group aligned, this group aligned. And so it might start to take a little bit longer, but eventually you can get everybody aligned and on board. Now we're going to get into a large organization, and just bear with me because we're going to have a whole lot of people and teams and functional areas and geographic regions, and you can quickly see how challenging this becomes because I just told you have to communicate frequently and often and consistently. And oh, for extra fun, we've got to talk to the engineers this way. We have to talk to sales this way. What I have found is if you start to get advocates for change on board and they start to understand why you are doing this, perfect. Now they can then go to their teams and start to get them on board with the change. And yes, you will have some bad apples that are going to try to sabotage the change. That's inevitable. There's assholes in every business. They just simply exist. So how do we contend with them? Well, if you have enough people that agree and they surround that individual and start to help them understand, help them break down their ego that they have. Well, this is the way we've always done it. Okay, cool, but we're doing it this way. And here's why. Once you show them that it's going to make their lives easier, they usually start to fall in line and start to get on board with the change. This is not easy. And this is part of the reason that so many integrations and change initiatives and ERP implementations fail, because people don't understand how to get everybody aligned and on the same page. A lot of times, CEO, hey, we're going to do this thing, and then they pass it off, and then the CEO just goes over and starts doing something else. And they lose sight of this project, of this initiative. And then all of a sudden, they get an update. Oh, well, we're 3 months behind schedule. We're $1 million over budget. Whoa, what happened? The person at the top is ultimately responsible. They have to take the time to understand what's going on. Or they have to have strong enough leaders at the top levels of the organization that know how to manage change and how to move things forward. This is why so many companies struggle and fail, because a lot of times we have undeveloped leaders promoting undeveloped leaders into these roles, and they end up just kind of flailing their way through and then blaming the employees. Oh, we can't find good people. Oh, my team keeps quitting. Oh, well, at some point you have to understand that these leaders probably need to learn leadership skills. They need to understand effective communication, how to delegate, how to hold people accountable. So I've talked about a lot of different topics, and we started off talking about change. That's one of the biggest things that I find, it's quite frankly shocking that more business leaders don't understand this, that all of these skills stack. And when it comes to leadership, it's almost like this web of all of these skills that we have to be able to coalesce in a meaningful way to get more and more people aligned. So the big things that I want you to think about and remember: spend some time planning. Pull the right people into the conversation early on, because it's these frontline leaders that actually know what's going on in the business. Don't operate from a place of assumption. Solicit their feedback and then incorporate it into the plan. Once there's a solid plan that everybody agrees on, then you start to communicate over and over and over to make sure everybody is aligned and they all know what direction we're going in. The final step is holding people accountable. Hey, We all put this plan together ourselves. We have all spent time communicating it, and you're starting to slip. I need you back in line, back on this project and on this initiative. These are uncomfortable conversations, but these are the types of conversations that simply need to be had. Give it a try.